Rebel religion in the news.
Oh, we love that AI-generated music opening.
We don't have to pay anybody.
Yeah. I'm Jerry O'Lennon. I'm your host of Rebel Religion in the News, where we take the day's stories, the things that are happening in the news, and see how they relate to our relationship with the Lord. With me is my co-host, Alfredo Romero, the pastor of Rock of Life Fellowship. We have Bishop Peter Hansen of St. Augustine Canterbury Anglican Church. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good morning.
We got a full plate of things to discuss today. We're going to talk about why more Americans are identifying as Republicans than Democrats. We're going to talk a little bit about Jimmy Carter. The former president turned 100 years old this week. But right now, let's talk briefly about Pete Rose, who passed away on Monday at his home in Las Vegas. And that would not be a surprise that that's where he wound up in Las Vegas. Of course, he was 83. They're still uncertain of what he died of, but he spent his last few weeks or maybe perhaps months in a wheelchair. The all-time hits leader, 4,256, I think it is, the all-time hits leader, a great baseball player, great baseball mind, but he had an addiction. He had a gambling addiction, which cost him being in the Hall of Fame. People still debate whether or not he should be in the Hall of Fame. People make good arguments both ways. I'm kind of on the fence. I'm not sure myself because he was a great player. The problem, and let's begin with this. He's not in the Hall of Fame, and I think he had an opportunity to. This happened in 1991. He was found to have bet on baseball games while he was the manager of the Cincinnati Reds. He bet not just on baseball games, but on his team's games. As far as there's no evidence that he bet against the team, but by betting on his team, it affected other games, because if he was betting on a game that he may say, you know what, I'm going to use my bullpen better. I'm going to save my best relievers for the games I'm betting on, or save my best players for the games I'm betting on. So it is a problem. But he never bet against his team, and he never did like the 1919 Black Sox did,
yeah.
where they actually threw games. Nothing like that. So there is a distinction between that. Let's begin with the fact that it took so long for him to confess what he had done. Bishop, aren't there like elements to recovery from whether it's an addiction or a sin? There are stages you have to go through, are there not?
Well, addictions are very interesting, and I've studied them, and I've even led groups of men out of certain kinds of addictions. So, the addiction is a relationship. The addiction itself, and what you're addicted to, is like a lover or a paramour, and there's a loyalty to that. There's a ritual around that. There's a whole thing there. There's a relationship, and it's just like another person essentially in your life. So if it becomes found out or suspected or threatened, the first response for somebody who's fully addicted is to defend it.
Or deny it.
Either by secrecy, by full denial. So you defend the territory. So I mean, if it's exposed, you know it's going to get out, and then you're going to have to change. Well, you don't want to change. I'm in love with this thing, this activity I'm doing.
You stopped right there, because I want you to continue. But in the case of Pete Rose, this happened in 1991. Bart Giamatti banned him from the game, and he did. And Rose denied that he bet on baseball. Denied it despite mountains of evidence. It would be the equivalent of a wife finding pornography on the website and the man saying, "I had nothing to do with it."
Right.
That's kind of where we're at here.
Exactly.
And so Rose, for the longest time, about 10, 12 years, said, no, I'm innocent. I didn't do anything wrong. It was the Dowd report. They got it all wrong. So one of the things is, the first thing is the confession, the acknowledgement that you've done something that's wrong.
Anybody who's been in a kind of a 12-step program, which is a Christian-based program, I mean, some can quarrel whether all of it's right, but that's okay. I mean, you can do it right and you can do it wrong. It's helped a lot of people. But the very first step in a 12-step program is to confess, I am addicted to this object, and I'm helpless to change myself. I need God's help, or I can't do it myself. It's a resignation from your ownership of the path of your life and giving it over to your God.
And it's that temporary satisfaction whether it comes through drugs or alcohol or gambling or sex. It's that thrill of that moment. For instance, with Pete Rose, it's that thrill of winning the big score of a baseball game and making the right prediction and getting the money. And I don't even think it's so much the money. It was just the thrill of gambling, because he had plenty of money.
Did he bet spreads? Or
I think he bet on everything. He ended up his life in Las Vegas. I remember working as a reporter there, and I did a story with him when he was staying at I think he was over at the MGM, one of them, and he would just sit there until the last dying day. He would be, signing baseballs for money and signing bats and telling stories, and he would go to the sports books and he would wager and wager and wager. So he spent his whole life at the end of his career in Las Vegas in a casino where he just set up shop, have a booth, and he would, go make wagers, and it was just his life. So the first thing is admission, the confession, the acknowledgement that I got a problem.
Yeah.
What's next?
Well, you need help. You can't do it yourself, and you generally need human help. I don't know the 12 steps all in order, but yeah, you've got to do an inventory. You got to see what your life has been. You got to be ruthlessly honest with yourself. You got to confess to people that you've hurt, and really be contrite. And you got to walk it out.
And I think with Rose, he was the only contrition, and the regret came from him not being in the Hall of Fame.
Which is a darn shame. It cheats us all.
Yeah.
I mean, if you get down to it, he was one of the great all-time baseball players. One of the finest, most incredible, gutsy,
hardworking. They called him Charlie Hustle.
Famous for that great slide into home base.
Yep.
Just head first and everything. And I read some articles about Pete Rose and whether or not he should be in the Hall of Fame. One person had to take is, if you had to separate, if you couldn't separate someone's personal life and their vices from their life as a professional baseball player or athlete, you'd have to take out people like Ty Cobb and all these other people that had vices, whether it was gambling or whatever. You'd have to take everybody out. So part of me says, I think he should be in the Hall of Fame as a baseball player and suffer the consequences of his betting on baseball. But I don't think it should be out of the Hall of Fame. That's just my personal opinion.
Yeah, I kind of think so too. Because there is there's a difference between Shoeless Joe and the 8 men out Black Sox scandal of 1919. There is a difference. Those players knowingly tried to lose a game, a World Series game, for money. Rose didn't do that.
No.
And there's no reason it couldn't have been put on his plaque. Rose was, as a manager of the Reds, was found to have bet on baseball and was banned from the game in 1991.
Right.
If that would have been acceptable.
Which was punishment enough.
Which would be punishment enough.
Yeah. I think so.
Maybe, but gosh, sometimes I it's a shame that he just couldn't find it in him, because there was a time, and I remember living through it. I was a sportscaster back when it mattered, when you were a sportscaster, and you would be, okay, they want to forgive him, but if he had just confessed it and said he was sorry and showed contrition, but there was no contrition. He spent his life in a casino betting on sports, so there was no contrition.
No, he wasn't about to give it up.
No. He was just too addicted.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, Pete Rose, God rest his soul. We hope that he did have the Lord in his final moments on earth, and that he is in the presence of Jesus. Let's hope that that's the case.
Amen.
Amen. And we have about 3 minutes left in this segment. Let's briefly talk about, if we could, Jimmy Carter. He turned 100 years old this week. Yeah. He looks 100, and but that's what's expected. He's lived a long life. And I don't know what to make of Jimmy Carter. I don't know what to make of living to be 100. Would you want to live to 100 years old?
I would want to live to 100 years old if I could live with the vitality and the energy and the ability to care for myself, like famous people like Betty White,
yes.
George Burns. I mean, they were famous. Even who's coming up on 100 is Mel Brooks. And he's still great. He's still I would want to be that vital person. I wouldn't want to be.
You want to die. You want to die with dignity.
Yes, I want to die with dignity. That's the way to say it. There you go.
Yeah.
The number isn't all that important, but to live a good, vital life and be able to be part of things, not just be sitting in some nursing home for a couple, 3 years, counting the days. You know.
I think Jimmy Carter has probably led a good life. I'm not sure he was a particularly effective president, but he did things in his post-presidency that are commendable. He started Habitat for Humanity, and his heart was certainly in the right place. I'm not sure if I agree with his policies on the Middle East and how he handled. I mean, he does seem to be a strong supporter of Palestine more than Israel, which may have come from his own Christian beliefs, as far as we know. I mean, I don't know.
Most people believe he was probably in the bottom 10 or 20 of the worst presidents in the United States.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah, that's what we're looking at. I definitely didn't agree with his policies. He did profess to be a Christian, a man of faith, you know, and I hope that. I hope that's true. No matter what his politics were, I hope he has a real relationship with Christ.
Well, he was a Sunday school teacher.
Yeah.
He was a Sunday school teacher before he came into to the office. I'm not sure he was a Sunday school teacher during his time in office, but after he left office and he and Rosalind went back to Georgia, he continued going to his home church, and I hope he's probably still going there now. But I'm not sure that I want to live to 100 years old. I'm not sure. Oh, I wonder why God decides I'm going to let this person live 100, and we're going to have this person.
I've got a woman in my parish who's 103 this week.
Right.
And she's living alone in her home. She's able to get up and take care of herself. Her family come and visit her frequently. Everybody loves her. She's a character, as you would imagine. I had a gal associated with my parish. She never came to church ever because she's a golfer. She's an avid golfer. And she made it to 107.
Wow.
Elsie McLean.
Elsie McLean made the hole in one.
Made the hole in one.
I remember that story. I did that.
At the age of 100.
Yes.
She hit a hole in one.
She was 103. I remember doing a story on her, and she appeared on Jay Leno, and she appeared on a lot of different talk shows.
Ellen DeGeneres gave her a golf cart.
Yes, I remember that. We're going to take a break, but as we go into the commercial break, we're going to remind people that the Women's Resource Clinic has its annual fall banquet
On the 11th.
on October 11th. It's on your screen if you're watching the podcast. It's Friday at 6 o'clock. The contact information, the website is there if you'd like to buy a ticket. I think it's like $35. It goes to help the Women's Resource Clinic, which is a pro-life organization which encourages women to carry their babies to full term. We'll be right back with more after this break.
Rebel religion in the news.
Hey, welcome back to Rebel Religion and News. We're with Bishop Peter Hansen and host Jerry Lennon. We've been talking about a little bit of everything this morning, and we'll hit politics on occasion. We'll make sure that everything is, respectful. But it's interesting, Jerry. I'm going to hand it over to you. It is amazing. For years and years, Democrats have been more registered to vote than Republicans, but not so much lately.
Yeah, more Americans are identifying as Republican than Democrat. There has to be a reason for that. 48% of respondents say they either identify as Republican or are leaning Republican for the upcoming election, compared to just 45% who identified as Democrats. That's according to a Gallup poll. They've shown a relationship to past presidential election outcomes are favoring the GOP as well. One more stat to throw at you. By 46% to 41%, Americans say the Republican Party is better able than the Democratic Party to address what they think are the most important problems facing the country. You know what I think is more than anything than the economy, and I'll see if you agree with me, Bishop Peter Hansen of St. Augustine Anglican Church. It's the social issues get lost and all. Everybody talks about the economy, immigration, foreign policy, but I think a lot of people just don't want the idea of their kids being allowed to change their sexes without their parents' knowledge from the schools. I think that's a big part of it.
That's a huge reason.
Yeah.
And the whole social schema. You know, I was a Democrat back in the 60s because I went to school at Berkeley.
You and Reagan.
And, yeah, sure. And I was there for the sense that it was more socially kind and responsible, and there was goodness in the Democratic Party. And the Republicans were all for, country club, corporate power and all that kind of stuff. And you could make a case for that. There has been a real difference in the realization that something about the Republican Party, especially now, I think, is it's highly individualized. We're not lockstep. We don't all have to vote the same. We can be, we can have a lot of opinions all over the map. There's individuality, there's freedom to one of the things we saw when I was at Berkeley, Sproul Hall was the place where people would be called for political rallies, and there would be somebody who would speak against the war, and that would be my big issue, the Vietnam War. And we'd go there at 4 o'clock when they said they'd be there, and instead of that speaker, you'd get this whole line of other speakers, like leader of the Black Panthers would get up and talk about Black Power, and then Cesar Chavez would get up and talk about boycott lettuce, and then somebody get up and talk about
Abby Hoffman.
Abby Hoffman. There would be this whole list of people. It would go on for an hour and a half until that finally, the speaker finally got up, and you get to realize, okay, this is not just a anti-war position. This is a by the farm. You gotta have this whole list of issues and take all this on. And these issues weren't just static. You got to stay on that point. These were all also moving targets, and like the gay liberation was about at that time. Don't arrest us for having sex behind closed doors. Why should two consenting adults be arrested for what they're doing together?
I think
And that's reasonable to say. We can morally object to the thing in a Christian mode, but you can't say you arrest these people for this. And yet year after year the requests, call it demands, have gotten different and stranger,
the goalposts keep moving back.
to the point where it's no longer about gays. The gays are being left behind. Lesbians are being left behind, and it's this sex change operations and things done to little kids, and there's always Lambda sitting in the corner waiting for its day.
And for
or
those who don't
NAMBLA,
know,
NAMBLA,
yeah, that's those who believe in
North American Man Love Association.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Where they changed the words from pedophilia to minor attracted adults.
yeah. And we're all supposed to be accepting of all this kind of stuff. And,
Yeah.
there's some point at which everybody's moral button gets pushed, and they go, "Why? No, boys in the girls' locker room gonna race in this swimsuit thing.
right.
No,
Yeah,
No, no, no.
interestingly enough, there was a news article I just saw just a couple of months ago where parents were protesting at a school for the school board for some of the materials that they were allowing for some of their policies regarding, children and sex and things like that. And the article wasn't about the protest; it was about the people that were protesting. And the people that were protest was a group of Christians and Muslims that came together with common ground to protest what they were doing to the children in these schools. And I thought that was interesting. And I think that's a reason why we're seeing this article happen. You're bringing common ground to a lot of people of different faiths and different backgrounds because of, like you had mentioned, or somebody mentioned, the goalpost moving so far, where I think reasonable people, no matter what their faith is or nationality, et cetera, are coming together just going, wait a minute, this stuff is crazy.
Everything got turned on its head, is what's happened. The Rockefeller Republicans are now the Chardonnay Democrats.
right.
And the
Martha's Vineyard.
yeah, the Martha's Vineyard Democrats, and the party of the wealthy is now the Democratic Party, and that's not a bad thing. Wealthy people need to be represented too. We want people to be well. There's nothing wrong with being wealthy. It's not money; it's the love of money that God doesn't like. And the other thing is, you always used to think as the Republicans as being the party that would get you. That was really big in defense and getting into wars and being very hawkish. The warmongers seem to be on the left, although Bush Cheney didn't help out matters very well by getting us involved into a war that many people think we didn't need to get involved in. I don't know how you feel about that, but it seems like now the party that might get us into a war is going to be that really is pursuing this. The aggression seems to be the Democratic
And they're
Party,
called
too.
the neocons,
Right.
which is really interesting. I mean, there's a flip here that's really quick. They talk about the flip where the Republicans became the racists, whereas the Democratic Party from the time before the Civil War until, the middle of the 20th century at least, were virulent anti-black. They They were the ones behind the Jim Crow laws.
KKK.
That you can check.
And the
KKK.
union vote now has gone, it seems solidly, to former President Trump and the Republicans.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why the Democratic Party has ceded this. They have just seemed like they've said, okay, I don't know. I don't know. I don't
They
understand.
have an elite attitude. It's not like back when Bobby Kennedy was running for president.
Right.
There's an elitism to it. That there's something that we're better than. They're going to these world conferences on how to engineer the world in a new way. And this is power. This is raw, unbridled power.
New World Order. Yeah.
One of
new
the things
world.
that I'm a little bit concerned about is if during this election, which is, gosh, we're like a month out, it's hard to believe
Yeah.
that if President Trump should win, that there is going to be all hell going to break loose,
Sure.
and the Democrats will never cede power. The ones that are accusing President Trump of not willing to give up power, that they will fight tooth and nail every state, every elector to get it overturned. It could get really ugly between Election Day and January 20th. I mean, I could see where the Senate or Congress says, or at least the Senate will say, we have 51 votes or 50 votes, and we're not gonna let this thing go through. I could see that happening.
Something happened to the Democratic Party, I think, right around the time of Obama, where it was no longer about platforms and debating the different plans for the United States. It became, we will not give up power under any cost. We will not give up power. And Elon Musk, actually, I mentioned this before, he actually had this great meme where he says, look, I'm a Democrat. I've always been a Democrat. And he had this little stick figure on the Democratic X, right? And he had Republicans off to the right, and these were the Republicans. And people kept saying, I'm changing that. People are accusing me of saying, I'm no longer a Democrat. And he goes, but I'm in the same spot. But the meme basically showed the new version of the Democrats way off to the left, just way over, because I didn't move, they did. That's what Bobby Kennedy is saying. And there's an actor that just came out yesterday, Zachary Levi, who's Shazam, and he was in a show called Chuck. He came out and says, I supported Bobby Kennedy, but my parents were Democrats, but we became Republicans during the Reagan era. He goes, I'm putting my support behind Donald Trump. So even nationally, you're seeing celebrities and public figures going, this is not the Democratic Party that I was part of 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago.
But it's possible that the Democratic Party is going to win. And some people say that's the end of democracy if that happens. I hope that that's not the case. I mean, would you go that far, Bishop?
Well, I hope not too. If they got control of all three branches of the government, now they don't have that now, and even with the election, they wouldn't have it. But if they swung the Congress over both houses, and were able to appoint 2 or 3 new justices, there could be rapid change. Now, one thing I've noticed in terms of the government, for several decades now, is that they all talk a good game when they're on the bottom, and declaim everything, and they're going to change it all and so forth. When they get into power, all those wheels slow down.
Yeah.
Because they're going to be responsible for what they just are going to say they're going to do. And they're going to have to live with that. And all of a sudden, it's not such zeal behind it. I've seen both sides take those kinds of stances, where they are absolutely going to do this, and then you just take a whole 4 years and never quite get to signing that. And it's interesting.
We have about 45 seconds left in the show. I just want to make sure that we find out anything new as we put up a graphic on our podcast of the service times at St. Augustine Anglican Church, 10 o'clock Sunday morning in downtown Chico.
Always welcome.
What's happening at the church?
Well, we just had, and this is probably not something that happens at your church, but St. Augustine's had St. Michael and All Angels last
We
night.
talked about that
We did.
last week.
Yeah, we had 8 baptisms last Sunday. It was exciting.
We liked it.
All right.
We have something to talk about next week. We're out of time. Gosh darn it. We'll talk to you next time here on Rebel Religion in the News. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Take good care and so long.
Enjoy the robot music.
Yes, here it goes. Here comes our AI music.
Rebel religion in